All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to pull back the curtain on something huge, the hidden architecture of control. And I mean from the inside of your own head all the way up to the institutions that literally shape our world.
So, here's how we're going to break this down. We've got a four-part journey ahead of us. We'll start small, right inside our own minds, looking at our own vulnerabilities. Then, we're going to scale all the way up to the massive systems that have figured out how to use them.
All right, first stop. We're diving right in by looking at let's call them glitches in our own internal operating system. Yeah, the bugs in our own software. So let me ask you a question. How reliable is your perception of time? And I mean really reliable. It sounds simple, right? But it's way trickier than you think. For a lot of people, especially folks with ADHD, that internal clock, it can feel kind of broken. It's often called time blindness. You know that feeling? When you get so deep into something that hours just melt away and feel like minutes? And look, this isn't just something that affects people with ADHD. It's a fundamental human trait. We are all hardwired to feel the now way more intensely than the later. Think about it. A $50 dinner tonight feels so much more real, so much more compelling than an extra $200 in a retirement fund 30 years from now. I mean, logically, we know the 200 is better, but that siren song of the present, it's almost impossible to resist. Okay, so this brings us to a really powerful metaphor for how we make decisions. Think of your mind as having two parts. You've got this giant, powerful, emotional elephant, that's your gut feeling, your intuition, and then perched on top is the tiny rider, that's your rational, analytical mind. Now, the rider thinks it's in charge, holding the reins. But let's be real, the elephant is the one with the power. It's almost always steering. And the rider's main job? A lot of the time, it's just to come up with a good story for why the elephant was already going that way. So we've got this emotional elephant running the show inside our heads. Now let's talk about the very first, and maybe the most powerful tool ever invented to influence that elephant, language itself. This is where things get a little wild. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is this idea that language doesn't just describe reality, it creates it. The words you have available aren't just labels you slap onto things. They literally build the framework, the scaffolding of your thoughts. If you don't have a word for a concept, it's incredibly difficult to even think about it clearly. And this isn't some slow philosophical process. It happens in a flash. We're talking 100 to 200 milliseconds, literally faster than you can blink. The moment you apply a label, a word, to a complex feeling, you can actually compromise your brain's ability to store it as a whole, complete memory. It's like language acts as a pair of scissors, snipping the delicate threads that hold the full experience together, breaking it into smaller, manageable, and less powerful pieces. And get this isn't just theory. There's hard data. Controlled studies have shown that just verbally labeling an experience can reduce how intensely you feel it by up to 40%. Think about that. Just by putting a name to an emotion, you can actually dampen it. And that little gap, that reduction in intensity, that's a window of opportunity where our perception can be tweaked and reshaped. So how does this scale up from one person to a whole society? Well, that brings us to this incredible concept, hyperstition. A hyperstition is basically a fiction, a story, an idea that becomes real. When enough people believe in it, when they act on it, that story starts to gain actual causal power in the world. It's the engine that can turn a collective myth into a force that literally shapes our reality. Okay, so let's recap. We've got these little glitches in our perception of time. Our emotions are running the show, and language itself can reshape how we feel. Now, here's the crucial point. All of these psychological levers are now being pulled not by individuals, but at an industrial scale, by the technology that surrounds us every single day. If you want to pinpoint a moment when everything changed, you have to look at the period between roughly 2010 and 2012. This was the perfect storm. You had the smartphone becoming common, you get the first front-facing cameras, and then Instagram pivots to visuals and gets snapped up by Facebook. This is the moment childhood rapidly shifted from being based in the physical world to being based on a phone. And this quote from Jonathan Haidt nails the business model perfectly. With these free social media platforms, you have to understand, we're not the customer, we're the product. They are in the business of harvesting our most precious, finite resource, our attention, and selling it to the highest bidder. And make no mistake, this wasn't an accident. The core strategy was to design these platforms for addiction. I mean, features we take for granted now, like the like button or the retweet, were specifically engineered to hijack our brain's dopamine reward system.
It's a slot machine in your pocket designed to create a feedback loop that maximizes engagement, no matter the cost to our well-being.
And the consequences? Well, the data speaks for itself. It is absolutely stark. Right after that technological shift around 2012, you see this terrifying spike. Rates of anxiety, depression, and self-harm among teenagers just skyrocketed, not just in the US, but across the entire Western world. The correlation is it's impossible to ignore.
Okay, so in our final section, we're going to bring it all together. We're going to see how these very same principles of controlling perception aren't just in our phones, they're baked into the very foundations of our major social institutions. Take public education, for example. Horace Mann, who's basically the architect of the American system, was pretty explicit about his goals. He promoted this idea that the state is the father of children. And the goal wasn't just about reading and writing. A huge part of it, stated openly, was about instilling obedience and positioning the government as the ultimate authority in a child's life. Now, fast forward to today, and you can see that historical goal echoing in things like proposed government surveillance programs. I mean, look at this table. It lists potential indicators of violence, things like being anti-capitalist or having hostility to traditional values. What this does is reframe political dissent as a potential national security threat. It essentially defines certain ways of thinking as pre-criminal. So, what's the end result? When you look at this long-standing architecture of control, from the classroom to the surveillance state, you see a system that can create a populace that's already conditioned for compliance. It's designed, whether intentionally or not, to produce citizens who are just less likely to question, less likely to dissent, and frankly, that makes them a lot easier to manage. And that leaves us with one last and pretty unsettling question. We've seen the glitches in our own programming, in our own minds, and we've seen the systems built to exploit them. So it really forces you to ask if our reality, both inside and out, is this programmable? Who exactly is writing the code?